Okay, so the Galaxy S23 Ultra versus the all-new iPhone 15 Pro Max. Right off the bat, the iPhone 15 Pro Max is not the upgrade that everyone had anticipated, and in this video, we pit it against the S23 Ultra and cover exactly how Apple finally lost this battle. And this is going to be the very first time ever that Apple's flagship phone is not able to dethrone the current Samsung Galaxy flagship phone. And I gotta tell you like this, it is over. You know how I know it's over? Because the Galaxy S24 Ultra is right around the corner. So this is going to be a compounding loss for Apple, meaning losing now to the S23 Ultra, and then the S24 Ultra drops before the Apple iPhone 16 series comes. Now, as a heads up, this video is bound to offend a few souls out there. Now, I know many of you are always willing to have, genuine and civil conversation in the comment section. Let's get that going. But to those of you who want to go ahead and bring up the insults, I'm ready for those, baby. Anyways, let's go ahead and do a proper start of this battle video with the prices. The Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra will run you $1,199. For the base unit, that would afford you 256 gigs of internal storage. The iPhone is also going to run you that same $1,199. Again, also with the base storage of 256 gigs of internal storage. Now, as far as deals go, Apple does not have any deals running right now, which of course, we knew that was coming. However, on the Samsung side, they actually brought back those insane flash deals again, and this will be applicable to tablets and phones and other devices out there. In the description, I have actual links that will lead you directly to those deals, so make sure that if you're currently in the market for one, you use exactly those links there. And these, by the way, are the last chance deals, so hop on this if you are interested. Now, let's go ahead and hop into the design of these two phones, and this is where the real battle takes place. And let me preface this by saying that although typically design is, fairly subjective, meaning I will like what I like and you will like what you like, there are going to be elements of the design that will call for us to be actually objective, right? The introduction of the USB Type-C port on the new iPhone 15 lineup, for example, is something that we can all objectively say that it is a good addition to this lineup. Now, that said, it doesn't change the fact that it's been around for a long time, right? It was just about time for Apple to go ahead and add that to its devices. Anyway, the all-new port found on the iPhone 15 Pro Max is a USB Type-C 3.0, whereas the one found on the S23 Ultra is a USB Type-C 3.2. And that's something to keep in mind, right? 3.0, 3.2 with the S23 Ultra. And by the way, the regular iPhone 15 is seeing a 2.0, meaning the same speed as what you had on the Lightning port before they moved over to the USB Type-C port. Additional features we can highlight here on both phones will include the mics, around the phones, the volume rockers, speaker grills, and here's something new on the new iPhone 15 Pro Max here. The good old mute switch is now a button that acts as an action button, right? For the mute function, along with some other functions that you can assign to it. But guess what? The Galaxy S23 Ultra already has that, right? The power button here is also an action button, and it offers a range of functions you can do with it. So Apple is essentially doing what it does best, introducing a feature that's been around and introduce it as a new feature, or label it as a new feature. But I'll tell you what's on the Ultra that's not on the iPhone 15 Pro Max here: a stylus slot, along with a stylus itself that does come included with the phone. But we'll talk more about that in a moment. Let's go ahead and talk display now. And the display was one of the biggest hypes preceding the drop of this phone here, specifically the bezels, right? Now, where are those, invisible bezels that we heard so much about that was going to be, coming with the iPhone 15 Pro Max? Personally, I was looking forward to buying the 15 Pro Max specifically because of those near invisible bezels. I mean, at one point, there was literally an S23 Ultra bashing campaign going on Twitter, and this was led by the famous Ice Universe, talking about how, Samsung should just stop making phones because bezels on the S23 Ultra are too thick, whereas the iPhone 15 lineup will have almost no bezels, or they will have, really, really thin, almost invisible bezels. And then, bam, we get these things right here. And these bezels barely look any different than those found on the iPhone 14 Pro, right? I mean, this is them side by side. And then what happened to those people who were pushing that invisible bezels campaign? They disappeared. They all shut up once people started calling them out on their BS. Now, don't get me wrong. They are marginally thinner, right? As you can see here. But at first glance, they look about the same as those on the 14 Pro and nowhere near anything that the renders initially showed us. Anyway, 6.8 inches display size on the Ultra versus 6.7 inches on the 15 Pro Max. 500 nits on the Ultra versus 460 nits on the 15 Pro Max. So the display is more PPI dense on the S23 Ultra, making it sharper than the 15 Pro Max display, at least on paper. Now, on the other hand, you get 2000 nits on the 15 Pro Max versus 1750 nits on the S23 Ultra. You get a flat display on the 15 Pro Max, whereas on the S23 Ultra, you get kind of a semi-curved, flat display here, which is personally what I prefer. They both support high refresh rate at up to 120 Hz, HDR10 on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, HDR10 Plus on the S23 Ultra. The iPhone 15 Pro Max is pushing a titanium build, and the Galaxy S23 Ultra is pushing what Samsung calls armor aluminum, right? So it's an armor aluminum build. Both phones, by the way, have very robust builds. Now let's go ahead and talk colors. The Galaxy S23 Ultra offers green, phantom black, lavender, and cream as main colors. Then of course you get the additional colors that are Samsung exclusive: lime, graphite, sky blue, and of course the red, like the one that I have here. But on the 15 Pro Max line, you only get 4 colors, right? Starting off with the white, you get a natural, you get a blue, and you get a black. No exclusive colors on the iPhone here. Now with all of this said, do me a favor and answer this question. After this short high-level list here, we've covered price, build quality, transfer speed, physical features, and the display so far in this video. So before we hop into performance, I would love to know where you stand. Where do you stand right now with this battle video of the S23 Ultra versus the iPhone 15 Pro? Now I can tell you where I stand. Nothing that came out of this iPhone 15 Pro Max is particularly mind-blowing to me or has overtaken the S23 Ultra so far. Nothing so far. At least that's me. By the way, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button there. Anyways, performance here, starting off with the Galaxy S23 Ultra. It's pushing the latest flagship by Qualcomm. It's a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 for Galaxy. It's very important to mention that part, right? So it's tailored specifically for this phone here in combination of your choice of either 8 or 12 gigs of RAM. And this chip, by the way, is bringing this phone here closer to a 30% faster or more powerful than the previous generation of this particular line. The iPhone 15 Pro Max is pushing, on the other hand, the latest flagship chipset by Apple, of course, in the A17 Pro with a new GPU accompanied with 8 gigs of RAM, all across, whether you go for the Pro or the Pro Max. And the chip on this iPhone is about 10% faster. And by the way, the new GPU here can push up to 20% faster than in the previous gen. You get Android 13 on the S23 Ultra, iOS 17 on the iPhone, of course. Now, let's not get too lost into the specs here. Let's go ahead and talk about just the practical side of these specs, right? So the iPhone 15 Pro Max is obviously going to be more powerful, but the only problem that I see with this is that when you have a more powerful chipset on the S23 or the S line, the phone or just the platform is flexible enough for you to be able to tap into a good chunk, a large chunk of that power, right? Or just the raw horsepower that it is pushing. But on iPhones, the more powerful it is, it doesn't necessarily translate into, the more useful it's going to be for most customers out there. Now, I know that not everyone cares, right? So people are just saying they want the fastest, the best, or the most raw power that they can get, but you're not really going to do much with it. Now, this leads us into just user experience when it comes down to the S23 Ultra versus the iPhone 15 Pro Max, all iPhones for that matter, right? On the S23 Ultra, you are able to do way more than you would on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Just because it's a new iPhone doesn't necessarily mean that it's drastically different when it comes down to user experience. When you compare that to the iPhone 14 Pro Max, you get the same user experience, meaning the UI. The way the UI is set up is going to be essentially the same, right? You will see the same UI on the S22 Ultra that you see here. But even on the S22 Ultra, you were already able to do a lot. And I'm talking in terms of productivity, right? So the platform itself already allows you to do a gigantic variety of things that you are not able to do on the iPhone, whether it be the iPhone 15 Pro or the 15 Pro Max, whatever it is, iOS just does not have the same UI or the same flexibility that you have on the S23 Ultra when it comes down to just productivity. And this is without even mentioning DeX, right? So I'm talking just in phone mode, the ability to multitask just in phone mode on the S23 Ultra versus in phone mode on the iPhone 15 Pro Max here, it's drastically different. The way you do split screen and resize things and, toggle back and forth on the S23 Ultra is already better than you would, than what you have on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. On top of that, I talked about the stylus, right? So that's something that you don't have on the iPhone, which is a feature or a tool that truly takes your productivity to the next level. Again, it's almost not fair to compare the S23 Ultra to the iPhone 15 Pro Max, but we just have to compare these flagship devices. But anyway, so the S Pen takes your productivity to the next level. Now, if you want to go beyond that, obviously you can tap into Samsung DeX. Nothing out there comes close to Samsung DeX. In case you own this phone and you've never heard of this, I will encourage you to go ahead and Google and try to find out more about this or watch the videos that I've made on Samsung DeX. It is a powerful tool, and that is something that doesn't exist on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. That's all I'm going to say when it comes down to performance and all of those specs. Let's go ahead and move on to the camera. in terms of camera, you still get that 48, 12, and 12 megapixel on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, but you get a larger sensor for the main camera this time around. So, better image quality, obviously, with a slightly better 5x telephoto camera. On the S23 Ultra, you get those 4 cameras that include a crazy 200 megapixel zoom. So that 10x zoom is out of this world and not available on the Apple platform. Again, Apple is not really doing anything to impress anyone, at least not me. Now, there is kind of a caveat when it comes down to cameras specifically, right? Because it's also subjective. There are people who prefer the level of calibration that, the Galaxy or Samsung offers on its devices, and there are people who prefer the level of calibration that you have with Apple, phones or tablets. All of this to say that you are going to like what you like in terms of cameras, and I'm going to like what I like in terms of camera. Personally, I prefer pixel cameras, but that's just me here. Anyway, so let's go ahead and talk battery. In terms of battery, the S23 Ultra, you have a 5,000 milliamp battery, and this is currently the king of battery. The S23 Ultra is the best. On paper, in terms of specs, when it comes down to the iPhone 15 Pro Max, is that the battery is essentially about where we were with the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Sure, we have a new chipset, of course. Battery management is going to be slightly different there. It's a more powerful chipset. It's going to be able to do a lot of things behind the scenes, for sure. But in terms of battery champ, S23 Ultra is still doing it. The new cooling system, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 here is something else when it comes down to battery management. It goes beyond what it's supposed to do. And on top of that, the Galaxy S23 Ultra is fast charge. Well, it will charge faster than the iPhone 15 Pro Max, right? It can charge at up to 45 watt, whereas the iPhone 15 Pro Max does not support 45 watt, right? So you can charge it faster, and plus wireless charge. You can have reverse wireless charge here to, charge a phone, earphones, your watch, and things like that. Whereas on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, what you can charge with your phone would be your AirPods using the USB Type-C port, the new USB Type-C port that is now available on this line of phones. Now, with all of this said, let me go ahead and reiterate this. The iPhone 15 Pro Max has done nothing to really blow my mind. It's good to see the changes and see, which way Apple is leaning now. It's good to see that they've finally adopted the USB Type-C port when it comes down to charging speeds, when it comes down to display, cameras, performance. I think the Ultra is still the phone to buy. Again, like I said earlier, it's almost not fair to compare these, not because the S23 Ultra is so much better than the iPhone 15 Pro Max, but because the S23 Ultra is built for productivity. The iPhone 15 Pro is a pro phone, right? But the way the S23 Ultra is built for productivity is as flexible as possible, along with the platform, the software, all of that good stuff to really enable you to be as productive as you can. Apple did the same thing, but there are things, within that platform that actually limit you or limit what you can do with your iPhone 15 Pro Max, because it is, stacked up with so much power, but you don't really have a lot of places where to push that power to. Whereas on the S23 Ultra, you have a variety of ways to go ahead and use that power. And as I mentioned earlier, with the iPhone 15 Pro Max not being able to dethrone the S23 Ultra as the new king, it's going to be a double whammy when the S24 Ultra comes with even more upgrades and fight against the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Because remember, this is kind of a cat and mouse game, right? So the iPhone would be better, then the new Galaxy Ultra will be better, then the new iPhone will be better, then the new Galaxy is better. This time around, the new iPhone wasn't better, so it stayed there, and we have the Galaxy right there. That's already good. Then you're gonna have another one on top of that, so compounding. Anyways, those are just my thoughts. Like I said, let's go ahead and have this conversation. I know a lot of you are going to be upset. Let's have a civil conversation down there. And of course, if you also want to throw insults like some or like a few of you do, I welcome them. Anyways, I'm certainly hoping that this was informative. I will catch you in the comment section. Also, like I mentioned, don't forget to use the link in the description if you want to go ahead and take advantage of those flash deals that Samsung just launched. Okay. Make sure also to hit the like button, share the video if you haven't done so already. Subscribe. I'm pretty sure I said that already. Make sure to subscribe. I'm going to catch you in the next video. Up until that next video, of course, as always, stay safe out there.